In 334 BC, a 21-year-old king stood on the edge of the world he'd soon reshape forever. Alexander, ruler of the small Greek kingdom of Macedonia, gazed eastward toward a giant empire so vast it stretched from the Aegean Sea to the mountains of India. Persia, a power that dwarfed his in numbers, wealth, and reach. Yet Alexander didn't hesitate. He invaded. Everyone expected him to be crushed. Instead, he won. At the river Granicus, he nearly died in the first minutes of battle, yet emerged victorious. At Issus, he shattered another Persian army and sent King Darius III fleeing for his life. Now, after driving Persian forces west of the Euphrates into chaos, Alexander turned east, deeper into the empire's heartlands. He wanted one thing: the final showdown. Darius knew it too. This would be the battle that decided everything. Word reached Alexander like a spark in dry grass. A massive Persian army was gathering at Gaugamela, near modern Mosul, in Iraq. Darius wasn't running anymore. He was ready. This was his last chance to stop the Macedonian wildfire before it consumed the empire. And for Alexander, this was the moment to crush Persian power forever. Darius chose his ground with care. Open plains, wide enough for his numerical advantage to matter. Perfect terrain for his terrifying scythed chariots machines. Designed to tear men apart, his soldiers worked relentlessly, flattening the earth so the chariots could race forward at full speed. By modern estimates, the Persian host numbered between 50 and 80,000, a colossal force drawn from every corner of the empire. Hardened infantry from Syria and Babylonia, cavalry from Armenia, India, and the vast steppes of Central Asia. Up to 200 scythed chariots waited at the front, blades flashing. Even war elephants stood ready, living towers of terror never before seen by most Greeks. Alexander's army was smaller, perhaps half the size, yet he moved with the confidence of a man who had already tasted the limits of fate and refused to believe they applied to him. He deployed in the formation that had brought him victory after victory. On the left, Thracian and Thessalian cavalry commanded by the experienced Parmenian. In this center, the steel core of the Macedonian phalanx, the veteran speakerman, whose 18-foot sarissas formed a moving wall of death. And on the right, where Alexander himself took position, his elite companion cavalry and his finest infantry, this was his hammer, the force with which he intended to break the Persian line. Behind them, Greek hoplites formed a second line, supporting both wings. The flanks angled back, creating a defensive shape, a safeguard against the Persian attempt to surround them. Alexander knew Darius would try to engulf him with numbers. He would not let it happen. The battle began not with a clash, but with a maneuver that seemed impossible to the watching Persians. Alexander slowly extended his right wing outward, as if he intended to encircle a force nearly twice his size. Darius, alarmed, reacted at once. He ordered troops from the center to move and counter Alexander's widening flank. He could not allow the Macedonians to escape the cleared killing zone prepared for his chariots. But Alexander's bold move was not an attempt to encircle. It was bait. As the Persians shifted to follow him, they sent to the very heart of the Armithind. That was the crack Alexander had been waiting for. Before striking, he ordered his Greek cavalry to charge and lock the Persians in place. Dust rose, metal flashed, and a massive cavalry battle erupted on the right cape, shouting, hooves pounding like thunder. Seeing this as the perfect moment to break the enemy, Darius finally unleashed his chariots. They thundered forward, blades spinning, meant to slice Alexander's forces apart. But the Macedonians were ready. Agrianes javelin throwers targeted the horses and crews with deadly accuracy. Infantry units opened deliberate gaps in their lines, letting the chariots pass harmlessly through before closing behind them. What was meant to be a devastating charge dissolved into confusion. That was the moment Alexander struck. With a burst of speed, he led his companion cavalry and the forward units of the phalanx straight toward the weakened Persian center. It was a charge so fierce, so sudden, that it seemed to tear the battlefield open. Dust and screams filled the air as Alexander drove deeper, always aiming for one target, Darius himself. The effect was instant and catastrophic. The Persians sent a book, then broke, then collapsed altogether. Panic spread like fire in dry grass. Into Charles Darius did the one thing no king should do at such a moment. He fled. His chariot turned and raced from the field, and his men, seeing their king depart, began to run as well. But victory was not yet secure. On the left wing, Parmenian's forces were collapsing under overwhelming Persian cavalry pressure. They were nearly surrounded. A gap in the Greek line allowed Indian and Scythian horsemen to break through. In a stroke of fortune for Alexander, instead of wheeling around to slaughter the Greek infantry from behind, these cavalrymen rushed to loot the Macedonian camp. Parmenian, caught in a savage struggle he could not hold for long, sent a desperate message to Alexander, begging for aid. Alexander faced an impossible choice: continue chasing the fleeing Darius, or save his left wing before it was annihilated. He chose his men. He broke off the pursuit, rallied his units, and charged straight into the Persian right wing. It was the bloodiest moment of the Daklos combat, so brutal that 60 of Alexander's own elite companions were cut down. But step by step, strike by strike, the Macedonians pushed the Persians back. As word spread that Darius had abandoned the battlefield, the final resolve of the Persian cavalry collapsed. They turned their horses and fled. The Battle of Gaugamela was over. Alexander had achieved one of the most astonishing victories in ancient history. Ancient sources claim he lost only a few hundred men, while the Persians lost thousands in empire-breaking defeat. With Darius in flight and his army shattered, the road to the heart of Persia lay open. Alexander marched into Babylon in triumph, greeted not as a conqueror, but as its new, rightful ruler. At Susa, another ancient capital, he took his seat upon the Persian royal throne. But there were still pockets of resistance. In the Zagros Mountains, Persian forces held a narrow pass known as the Persian Gates. Their defense stalled Alexander for a entire month in a single mountain corridor. Only after discovering a hidden path did the Macedonians flank and destroy the defenders. Nothing now stood between Alexander and Persia's Sacred Heart. In early 330 BC, he entered Persepolis, the ceremonial capital, the symbol of Persian kingship. Alexander had long tried to present himself to the Persians as a liberator, a rightful successor. Yet in Persepolis, he made a decision that would echo through history. Whether as revenge for Xerxes' burning of Athens centuries earlier, or as a calculated message to all Persia, he ordered the city looted and set it ablaze. Flames swallowed halls of gold, carved palaces, and the treasures of kings. A civilization's glory turned to ash. Alexander then pursued Darius north into Media, to the royal city of but the Persian king, refusing to surrender, fled eastward in hopes of raising one last army in Parthia, Bactria, and Sogdia. Fate did not give him that chance. As Alexander's forces closed in, Darius was betrayed and murdered by one of his own governors, Bessus, who crowned himself the new ruler of Persia. When Alexander reached the fallen king, he was devastated. He ordered that Darius be buried with full honors in the royal tombs of Persepolis, among his ancestors. Alexander's respect for his rival was genuine. The usurper Bessus, however, had sealed his own doom. With Persia now his, Alexander paused to organize the largest empire the world had ever seen. He appointed trusted viceroys, leaving several loyal Persians in power. He allowed Greek troops who wished to return home to do so. Then, with the west subdued, the center conquered, and the heart of Persia under his feet, he turned once more to the east. His goals were clear: hunt down Bessus, subdue the eastern provinces, and push further toward the world's edge, toward lands unknown, toward a horizon only Alexander dared chase. And he marched on.